you? Thank you very much for watching this video. In this video I am going to show you about exporting photos in Lightroom and using all of the exporting settings with and without watermarks, how to change your settings and why you should change them that way, and how to organize your photos in ways that will be easier to use in the future. So what we're going to do here is we have a random Lightroom library selected, and we're going to go ahead and select the ones that we want to export. For this example, we're only going to do a few of them, that way we don't have too much going at one time. So we're going to select the ones we want to export, and we're going to go up here to File, and then we're going to go to Export. Now what I would highly recommend, because I do it two different ways, I actually have an export that I use for photos that I only use online and on websites and social media. The reason I do this is because you put a lower quality with watermarks out. That way if anybody does try to steal your work, they don't get great quality work. They're not going to get your high quality, high definition photos. Instead, they're going to get a lower quality that's pretty much only going to look good on a computer screen, but if they attempted to stretch it out or use it anywhere else, it's going to distort the photo and give them problems. So what I would recommend doing, if you're going to be doing this a lot, is I would recommend setting presets for your exports. You can do that by going down here after you click on export and this window comes up. If you click on the add button and you give your preset a name, in this case we're going to name it web, and we're going to hit create. That's going to go under user presets. Alright, so then what we want to do is we want to go step by step down all these options here. Export location. The way that I normally organize all of them is I have an external hard drive that has a folder for all of my photos, and then it separates that inside that folder. I then organize it by folders according to events that I do or photo shoots or anything like that. In this case we did the 2016 Leesburg National Night Out. I already have that there. You can hit choose, and from inside choose you can select new folder, name it whatever event that you want to name it, and then once it's selected, hit select folder, and then you could also tell it to put it in a subfolder, which is what I like to do. I normally have all of my main photos in the main folder that are going to be used for professional in process, or all my high quality photos, and then any photos that I use strictly for online or for promotions go into a subfolder inside of that folder called web. So what I do is I check mark put in subfolder and I name it web. Alright, and we're done with this section. There are a couple of other settings, for example like the existing files, ask what to do. This is in case you're doing another export of the same photos. If it detects the same files, and it goes by file name, if it detects any files with the same name, you can choose to either skip it, overwrite without warning, or you can tell it to ask you what to do. So if it does find it, a little window will pop up and say that it found a duplicate entry, and give you the option of either overwriting or skipping at that point. I always like to leave it on ask what to do. That way if anything like that does happen, I'm made aware of it and I can go back and fix it later. So the next setting on here is file naming. I like to name all of my photos starting with the event name and then give it a consecutive number. So I select the option to rename to, and then select custom name, original file number. Sometimes I'll do custom name sequence, especially if I'm doing an event where I'm doing like a sports event where I do one-on-one with individuals. That way I can sit there and look at the sequence number on my camera and be able to write those numbers down and associate it with the people. But in most cases I just do the custom name with original file number. Extensions doesn't really make much of a difference. I always leave it at lowercase. Next option would be video. This would only apply if you're exporting any videos. File settings. This tells you this is where you can choose what kind of what kind of file you're going to export to. The most common one is going to be JPEG. This is going to be all your photo files. You could also do it in Photoshop file format, TIFF file format, which is a lot more high quality but also a lot a much larger file size. If you do original, it'll import or it'll export whatever you imported from the camera. I always shoot in RAW, so I don't do original. This way it converts all of my RAW format to JPEG format. Always make sure the quality is 100% for the best quality. Color space, some people argue about this. sRGB I find is the best for color correction throughout most printers. You can go Pro Photo RGB if you're shipping out to a professional printer, but that's, once again, that's just another personal preference item. Image sizing is very important, especially when you're doing the width, or I'm sorry, especially when you're exporting for website use only or for promotional material. By making your images a lot smaller, then you are making it so that people can't download and stretch your image out and use it for other items or crop things out. A lot of times if you have a watermark and they try to steal your images, they will try to crop out that image and then stretching your image out so that they can get it to fit something. I came up with the size 735 by 440 because it's a very good rectangular landscape size that can be used on most blog posts. It could be used on most social media posts, anything like that. It will show up very nice and clean when you're on a computer. However, if somebody were to download it and try to stretch it or print it, it's going to distort and it's not going to do them any good. So I always select the resize to fit, width and height, and then I change it to 735 by 440. Now the width and height here will actually, like let's say if you shoot a photo in portrait instead of landscape, it'll actually change those dimensions around. So if you're shooting a photo in portrait mode, the short end will still be 440 and the longer end will still be 735. And then I change where it says resolution. The default setting I believe is 200 pixels per inch. I like to change mine to 72 pixels per inch, which is the best resolution for viewing online only. Once again, if say I were to print that out or try to stretch it out for anything else, it's going to distort the image and they're not going to be able to use it. All right, and then the output sharpening. I really don't use this simply because most of my sharpening is done in the camera. By focusing and doing the settings properly. If you need to sharpen them for any reason, I wouldn't recommend using this setting. I would recommend either doing it in Lightroom manually or doing it in your camera manually or using another photo editor. Metadata is a very, very important thing. Metadata is the information embedded into your photo. That includes what kind of camera you use, what kind of lens you use, the setting your camera had on there, any copyright information that's attached to your camera. A lot of this can be achieved inside your camera. If you have the disc that came with your camera, especially Canon, I'm very familiar with Canon, I know it has it. You can go in there and you can predefine your name, your copyright information, your contact information, and that way every single photo that's ever taken using that camera, it will automatically embed the metadata into that photo. If you haven't been able to do that, or if you just want to be secure and do it again, you would choose that in here. So basically the metadata it's going to tell it what to put in here. So there are several different options. You can do copyright only, copyright and contact info only, all except camera and camera raw info. I select all metadata. That way if anybody ever looks at it, they can, or even myself, it's a great reference to go back and look at a photo that you've taken and read the metadata and remind yourself, hey, I shot this at 800 ISO and at 1/125th shutter speed. So you'd be able to look at all of that. And on some cameras it even has where you can use a GPS metadata, which will tell you exactly where you were when you shot that image. So I always leave this to all metadata, and I wouldn't recommend changing that. I mean, you can if you want. Watermarking, there's a couple of different options to do with watermarking. You can choose to use an image as a watermark, like a transparent custom watermark, or you can choose to use just simply text. The way that I have mine set up, I have a couple of different ones depending on what images I shoot. So here on this particular one, it's just text. It has my name and the name of the company that I shot for that. In this case, it's a news company. Then basically when I take the pictures and I export them, it'll show copyright, and then it'll have my name and the company name on there. You can use the settings here to adjust all that, adjust the location, and adjust the font, adjust the thickness, the style, anything like that. Or you can, under image options, you can choose any file and then upload a custom watermark. You could also save those whenever you complete it. You can go over here and you can either create a new one or update current ones. So you could save current settings as a new preset, or update presets, or restore default presets. Once you save your presets, every time you use it after that, you'll be able to click here and just select which one is which. So I've got several of them here. And one of the ones I do use quite a bit is this one here. I'll show you what that one looks like. It basically covers the entire picture in the middle, keeping people from using it for anything else, giving a website to a web URL to my website, as well as my Facebook and my phone number, giving them contact information to contact me. So once you select your watermark and you've got all your settings set up so appear where you want it, you can go down to post processing and tell it what to do after the export is done. I tell it to do nothing. It just finishes exporting, Lightroom stays open, nothing else happens. If you want, you can set it to show in Explorer. That way when the export is done, the folder that you exported everything into will automatically appear. I selected do nothing only because when I'm done doing this, I normally start working on more photos and continue going. So once we have all those settings done, we can go ahead and go. We already have that saved. We click export. It's going to tell us those files already exist. We're going to skip that. And now if we go back into that folder, I'm going to go to our external photos web. And now here is one of the photos we were just working on. Oh, didn't click on it. Here we go. And you'll see here where it shows the watermark, and it's a lot smaller than the original size. Now if somebody were to try to go in or zoom in on it, you'll see how it pixelates and starts distorting the photo. That way it prevents them from using it on most applications. And then you would do the same thing if you wanted to do another preset. Just go to File, Export, and then you could choose another preset. We'll hit Add, and we'll name this one High Quality, and save that under User Presets. And then we'll just go through all the settings again. We're going to change the export location so that it doesn't put it in a subfolder. It's just going to drop it into that folder. Actually, we're going to change this just for the tutorial purpose. So we're going to deselect the put in subfolder option. Leave the rest of that alone. We're going to leave the file naming the same. We want the file naming to match the same exact name that is going to show in web. And I only do it that way. That way, if anybody online says, oh, I'm interested in photo that's labeled Leesburg 2016 National Night Out 3, I can go into my high quality folder and find the same exact name, and those photos should match. We didn't have any changes in video. We're going to go to File Settings. We're going to leave that the same. Image sizing, we're going to uncheck the resize to fit, and we're going to change this to 300 dpi. Now even though the default setting in Lightroom is 200 dpi, I recommend 300 dpi. mainly because I have experience in working with offset printing and graphic design, and it is highly recommended by almost every printer that 300 DPI is the highest quality and the recommended quality for printing and getting the best, sharpest images. So, I mean, you could set it to 200 and leave the settings the way they were with the default settings. I personally recommend 300 DPI. So we change the DPI, and then we want to go to our watermarking, and we want to remove the watermark, and that way we're not going to have a watermark. Metadata, I would still say leave all metadata, and then you can select export, and the same photos will export. This one's going to take a bit longer because instead of resizing them to smaller files, we're going to be exporting the full high quality images. All right, and now that our export is done, we'll go ahead and pull that back up. And these are the images that we just exported. And you'll see how it's a much bigger image, higher quality, and no watermark. All right, and that completes this tutorial. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or send me a message either on Facebook or email. My email address is luis, L-U-I-S, @shotsbyluis.com. You could also look me up on Facebook. The link will be provided.